This is Arab Talk on KPOO 89.5 FM in San Francisco. This is Arab Talk with Jess and Jamal. I'm Jess Khanam.
And I'm Jamal Dejani.
Jamal, the ethnic cleansing and attack in Gaza City continues unabated today. The Israeli military has launched a full-fledged kind of assault on the civilian population in Gaza, together with the ongoing starvation. The situation is very bleak, despite the fact that there's discussions of an ongoing ceasefire. We're going to be talking about that ongoing situation during our show today. We're also going to talk about the Israeli Foreign Ministry has hired Mark Penn's firm, Stagwell, to chart a path out of global isolation for Israel. As we've been talking about, Israel has been globally isolated at every single sector in the world right now, and they've hired essentially a marketing firm to see how they can get out of this mess. The Gaza war film, The Voice of Hind Rajab, has won the second prize at the Venice Festival, and we're going to be talking about the emotional ceremony around that prize. And then finally, Jamal, with the attacks in Gaza, church leaders' decision to stay in Gaza City despite the genocide has inspired many Palestinian Christians in the Holy Family Church to stay in this situation despite fears of Israeli attacks. Before we get to those stories, Jamal, we're going to watch a really incredible interview that you did with the geopolitical analyst Sean Mathews. Is going to discuss the plans to reconstruct Gaza while ethnically cleansing the Palestinian population. It's a very compelling interview, Jamal. We're going to be watching that first before we get to these other stories.
That's right, Jess, and we'll see. I mean, this is the Gaza Riviera plan, and it has many other names, by the way, by now. But anyway, let's watch Sean Mathews. Israel continues to brutally massacre and displace Palestinians in Gaza City in its latest so-called Gates of Hell operation. Israeli officials state their goal is the complete ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from Gaza by either extermination or expulsion. Its campaign to render Gaza completely uninhabitable by destroying all the infrastructure and civil society is unrelentless. It is a preamble to a Trump Riviera Gaza plan called the Gaza Reconstruction, Economic Acceleration, and Transformation Trust. This proposal was devised by some of the same Israelis who created and set in motion the pernicious U.S. and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation scheme. It proposes a Dubai-like techno-metropolis built over the graveyard of ethnically cleansed Palestinians. Can a Gaza reconstruction that shuns Palestinian ancestry and participation and denies their genocide succeed in the long run? Joining us on Arab Talk is Sean Mathews. His recent article in the Middle East Eye is entitled Financially Feasible but Impossible: Why the Gaza Riviera is Doomed to Fail. He's a geopolitical analyst and journalist covering business, security, and politics in the Middle East, North Africa, and Europe. Welcome back to Arab Talk, Sean.
Thanks for having me on, Jamal.
So who are the principal architects of this plan, and when was it initiated? Was this before Trump made his famous Gaza Riviera statement, or was Trump referencing a plan already in the works?
It seems like Trump was referencing a plan that's been in the works for some time. And we know this if you go back and you listen to some of the early interviews that Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law and former Middle East advisor, gave in late 2023, early 2024, in which he discussed the idea of forcibly displacing Palestinians from Gaza, quote unquote, moving them out, and then rebuilding, leveling the area, rebuilding it into some type of techno city. So this plan has been floating around for some time with Kushner, who obviously has close ties with the Israeli government and with many in the Gulf region. And then Trump seemed to harness this plan earlier this year, back in February, when he unveiled the Gaza Riviera. I think it's notable for a few reasons, Jamal, if we look at the timeline. So Trump came out, he announced this plan, which clearly Kushner had kind of pre-assembled with potentially some Israeli-American academics and former Israeli military officials in Israel. And then Trump had a lot of pushback on this plan from Egypt and from Jordan, and he backed off talking about it in public. King Abdullah of Jordan visited Washington earlier this year. My sources tell me that he was very forceful in pushing back against this plan, obviously, because Jordan and Egypt are petrified about accepting a forced displacement of Palestinians. But what's interesting is that in the recent months, although Trump has backed off publicly discussing the plan, the Israelis have really latched on to it. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made this one of Israel's stated war objectives, actually. So there's no doubt that Israel wants to achieve the Gaza Riviera plan, which includes ethnically cleansing Gaza and then rebuilding it into some type of Dubai techno futuristic city, as you described. But yeah, the plan's been around for at least a year, and even longer than that.
So Trump had a recent meeting at the White House to discuss post-Gaza plans with Jared Kushner and Tony Blair, sitting among others. This plan almost certainly was part, as you've mentioned, of that discussion, as it entails the United States as the holder of the trust for the first 10 years of the development until it becomes profitable. Can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, so what we have really are multiple competing Gaza Riviera plans. There's the plan that Kushner and his allies have kind of devised. There's the Blair plan, which had the backing of Boston Consulting Group. And then there's this plan, which I specifically reported on, that was first leaked by the Washington Post, which had input from BCG, Boston Consulting Group. And this is being led, it looks like, by Israeli American venture capitalists, tech investors, and some former Israeli generals. And this is the plan that, it's a mix of really outlandish flattery. And in some ways, it's really detached. It strikes me as detached from kind of the realities on the ground. Even if you look at their premise, which is, to create a Elon Musk smart city, a corridor for IMEC, the India Middle East Economic Corridor. A lot of these things have just been thrown in, it seems like, to appeal to Trump's vanity and to things that the American think tank world is interested in. Well, what's notable, of course, is that those who follow Washington, that Trump has fallen out with Elon Musk, and that Trump is also tariffing and sanctioning India. So it's funny. It seems like the Israelis are trying to latch on to anything that the American think tank world devises, is kind of pro-business and pro connection in the Middle East. But it's not clear to me that Trump himself is attached to any of these ideas specifically, although he probably is attached to the idea of creating some kind of Riviera.
You cite a post-war reconstruction expert from MIT about rebuilding from devastation using World War II as an example, just clearing the land of rubble and ordnance before even the initial phase of infrastructure, which is an enormous undertaking. What are the estimates and timeframes involved?
I mean, Jamal, it's so outlandish, and no one can really give you an estimate or a time frame. The most concrete number that was listed actually was this $100 billion price tag to, totally ethnically cleanse Gaza, level the entire territory, and then rebuild it into some techno city. And actually, for my article, what I did was actually ask the question was, is that price tag feasible? We look at other mega projects in the region, for example, Egypt's new capital. It's being built for about $60 billion. The UAE has also bought land rights to a swath of the Egyptian Mediterranean coast for $30 billion. So the numbers, this $100 billion price tag, if you just look in a very cynical fashion at the value proposition, it could be done, leveling Gaza and rebuilding it. And that was what stood out to me in the article. The experts that I spoke with from Columbia University, from MIT, who said that the economic side is actually there. But of course, it's impossible because it rests on a lot of flawed assumptions. And the three of them I'd love to name with you. The first is that Israel is going to be able to totally eradicate the Palestinian population in Gaza. I think, and if you speak to Palestinians in Gaza, they are determined to stay in their land. And the only way Israel is going to be able to do that is if they really kill every single Palestinian in Gaza. And so far, I mean, I don't think that is possible. They're trying to, obviously, there's a genocide going on, but to kill 2 million Palestinians, I think would be in the extreme, in the sense that there will be some force, I would hope, that could stop Israel, because the Palestinians simply will not give up their homes. The second premise is that if they wanted to build this with some Palestinians there's absolutely zero Palestinian buy-in to this plan. And one of the academics that I spoke with summarized it very well and said, the idea in and of itself to create a new Dubai in Gaza, it's not necessarily a bad idea if it had Palestinian buy-in and if it was built around the aspirations of a Palestinian state. I think if you ask most Palestinians in Gaza, would you love a Dubai to be, one of the cities in your new country? They would probably agree to it. No one is against investment in a Palestinian state, but it lacks any Palestinian buy-in at all, this plan. So there's nothing in the plan that really talks about accommodating the Palestinians' aspirations for national statehood. And there's going to be a long-term insurgency and guerrilla conflict in Gaza with this plan. I mean, Hamas is not defeated in Gaza. After 23 months of conflict, Hamas has shown that it's continued to be able to wage guerrilla-style warfare against Israeli troops. And this plan it's simply not feasible without Palestinian buy-in. And the notion that Palestinians would be given a stake in what should be a Palestinian state with their premise. The third element to this plan, which makes it impossible, is that it rests on foreign investors coming in and purchasing land in an ethnically cleansed Gaza. And money is dirty and money floats around. But most experts agree that the scale of the ethnic cleansing going on in Gaza would deter all but the most cynical foreign investors from actually investing in this kind of a plan.
I mean, this plan has sadistic foundation. I mean, if you think about it, Gaza now is a killing fields, for Palestinians. For example, what provision will be made for uncovering the tens of thousands of people buried alive under the rubble, identifying them, and giving them a dignified burial?
There's no provision, Jamal. And sadistic is the word that one of the analysts that I spoke to used, and I think it's aptly describes the situation because basically what this plan tries to do is distract the general public, right, who might not be following this conflict as closely as us, distract it from the scale of ethnic cleansing going on in Gaza, and basically say that all of this has to be done in the name of development. So it really is a sadistic cover, I think is a specific quote that one of the analysts in my article gave, and it's true because in the name of development, there's this belief that we can get away with it. And I think the Israelis are going to fail in that.
Mm. Well, in terms of, if you mentioned the financial viability, you call this another Dubai or Dubaification model, similar, for example, to how the United Arab Emirates developed Egypt's new administrative center along the desert outside Cairo. And you talk about dirty money. I mean, where the money is going to come from? We know that Trump doesn't like to spend his own money, even on the private sector, or Jared Kushner for that matter, getting the Qataris involved or other countries involved. So if we're talking just the financial viability itself, who's going to come up with the money?
Yeah, well, that's the point. I mean, look, the analysts that I spoke with, in a sense, they're distracted. Let's start with this. I mean, the Gulf states have been here before: Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar. I mean, they all have different motivations. They all have different positions on Gaza, but they have been in the position before where Israel destroys and it calls them in to rebuild, right? I mean, Qatar rebuilt Gaza after previous conflicts, and now look at what's happened. So I don't think any of the Gulf states are going to make a serious investment in Gaza, knowing that the Israelis could just come in and level it again. And of course, this plan, which is drafted by Israelis in the tech sector and in the military, I mean, it's clearly geared towards the Gulf, right? The bling of the Gulf investment. But I think they're going to have a hard time getting takers. In terms of what I talked about, the feasibility was simply looking at that price tag, the $100 billion estimate. And I said that if you look at other mega projects in the region, that is actually in keeping with kind of what the costs have been. So Egypt's new administrative capital, the estimate that it costs is about $60 billion to build it from ground up, right? A flat, expansive desert to lay the foundations and then to build the mosques, the churches, the skyscrapers, everything that's going on there. So the number itself actually makes sense, is what I say. And then I say, then the comparisons stop there because they're going to have a very difficult time getting any Gulf states to come in and invest in this. Maybe they get some members of the Israeli diaspora, who might want to buy it, build the tower too. But even then, right, the plan rests on completely ethnically cleansing Gaza.
Well, also, for example, the Saudi government has been cutting back on its own pet projects. For example, its futuristic city, Noam. That's the other question. I mean, economically speaking, for example, because they keep talking about the Gulf countries, the Saudis, getting the Saudis involved, UAE, and so forth. I mean, do they have even the money to do it?
I think, Jamal, it would surprise you if we just talk about the money. I think the Saudis know, and Saudi is a unique case. Qatar is also a unique case. But I think the UAE, if you just ask, do they have the money to do it? I think the answer would be yes. And I look at Egypt. I mean, Egypt's economy is a basket case. The new administrative capital is really a money sinkhole. I mean, the UAE paid $35 billion just for development rights to a swath of Egypt's northern coast, Mediterranean coast, just for the development rights. That's before any construction begins. So there is money out there. And one of the experts that I spoke with at Columbia University said that they don't think money is the problem. And I think that is what people who care about Gaza should be aware of, is that we shouldn't dismiss this plan as improbable. You mentioned in the beginning there, Jamal, that the academics and the thinkers who are behind this plan are also linked to the very discredited Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, right? If I told you last year that we were going to have something like the GHF, maybe you would have said it was impossible, that there would be this institution where Palestinians are being put in cages in order to get food. But it became a reality. So in the article, what I try to do is say that don't dismiss the plan simply because it has gleaming skyscrapers in it, in that the premise of it could very well make sense to some investors, especially in the Middle East sordid geopolitical landscape. But again, the reason why it's impossible is because it rests on this foundation that, first of all, the Palestinians in Gaza are going to totally leave their homes, and that even if they don't, they're going to sit by and watch this happen to their landscape. And I think after 23 months of conflict, we've seen that the Palestinians in Gaza simply aren't going to stand for that.
Well, that's a question, assuming Israel does not totally ethnically cleanse the Palestinians, basically kill 2 million people or force them to other countries, which seems not going to happen because Egypt is not going to allow that.
Yeah.
And then the Palestinians who remain there, the ongoing plan is to funnel them into concentration camps if they want to receive food and tents. I mean, that's how it reads. What happens then? It's been said that they will be kept in camps until they are, and the term they use, de-radicalized. Talk about that. What do they mean by de-radicalized?
I think they mean just another version of ethnic cleansing, and basically taking any of the fight out of the Palestinians. But I think that one lesson after 23 months of conflict, Jamal, is that the Palestinian resistance is still going strong after 23 months of war. So, look, I'll give you an example. We've seen other cases where imperial powers, imperial-minded powers, try to create mega projects in places which are riven by insurgency. One example that comes to mind actually is in Pakistan, in Baluchistan. China is trying to build a port there. They have built a port there, but it took them 10 years. And there was a Baluchistan uprising, which made it really impossible for the Chinese to kind of do work in that area. So I think the notion that the Palestinian resistance would just stop fighting and put down their arms is Dubai skyscrapers are going up is ludicrous. It's as simple as that. I mean, after 23 months of war, we've seen that Hamas and other resistance groups are able to continue their attacks on Israeli soldiers. So without some kind of buy-in from a wide swath of the Palestinian population, this plan has no legs.
Yeah, and also the way they present it and the financial incentives, I hear sometimes that they're going to offer every person $6,000. Sometimes it says $9,000 and enough money for food for a year. I mean, in this world, what can you do with 6 or 9 or 10 or 20 even $1,000 to leave your home and head somewhere
Right?
else?
Yeah, I mean, even in Egypt, $5,000 isn't going to take you far if you're a family of five, right? I mean, it's laughable. But again, I think the lesson to take from that offer is that the goal of this plan is to ethnically cleanse Gaza, right? And what the authors of this plan are trying to do is make it attractive for investors to buy into ethnically cleansing Gaza. I think the plan calculated that for every 1% of the population of Gaza that leaves, the investors would save $20,000 or $23,000 basically for each 1% of the population of Gaza that leaves. So again, looking outside of the numbers, I think the broader scope of the plan is pitching ethnically cleansing to investors, which is remarkable, right, in its own right, and sadistic, as you said.
You spend a lot of time in Europe, And when they talk about sending Palestinians somewhere else, they've pitched Sudan, and before that, the Sinai Desert in Egypt. But most migrants or refugees head to Europe. I mean, what are the Europeans saying about this? They have problems with migrants coming from Africa. They're coming from all the way from Pakistan and other places. What will they do with 2 million Palestinians?
Yeah, Jamal,
Have they even given it a thought?
I I think the Europeans they have so many crises going on, but I mean, you raise a great point. I mean, Egypt. Let's just take Egypt, right, which might be the most probable case of a destination simply because it borders Gaza. Egypt is the number one or the number two country sending migrants to Europe via the Mediterranean today. So Egypt's not a country where everything is hunky-dory. Egypt's in a deep economic crisis. And even 1 million Palestinians coming from Gaza, 1 million starving Palestinians with children who haven't been in school for 2 years, with no jobs, with no prospects, that could massively destabilize Egypt and spark another migration crisis. Greece, Athens, where I am, would be on the front lines of it. So would Italy. So I think this also signifies why the Europeans are breaking with the Trump administration a little bit in terms of how they're approaching Gaza. The recognition of a Palestinian state, whatever you want to call that. I mean, there's various views about kind of, how sincere the Europeans are about that. But clearly the break between Europe and the US over Israel and Palestine, that's starting to emerge, the whiff of a break, right? I'm not saying it's a fundamental issue, but there is a whiff of it. That points to, I think, the different perspectives between Europe and America over the very real geopolitical, forget the moral issues of ethnically cleansing, but the geopolitical and the geopolitical reasons why Europe would oppose this kind of a plan, which you so rightly bring up, migration.
And it's kind of funny because they're not mentioned as being part of the plan. They talk about Gulf countries, but they don't talk about, for example, the EU pitching money or investing in this. I mean, is this done purposely to kind of also separate Europe from the Trump administration, from the United States and Israel and the Gulf or members of the so-called Abraham Accords?
Yeah, well, look, you bring up a good point. I mean, look, if we just look at the Gulf region, right? Think about Dubai or think about Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 program and the premise of Vision 2030. Saudi Arabia wants to attract foreign investors and foreign residents into the country, right? And they're pitching that towards the global south, but also to Europe, right? To people in Britain, to people in Europe, and even Americans. So the Israelis basically have to find a way. This is the main problem. If they do empty Gaza, say they are successful on that front in ethnically cleansing it, they have to find a way to pitch this ethnically cleansed enclave to a new global elite of upper middle class, lawyers, doctors, academics. I just do not believe personally that there's enough people that are willing to relocate to an ethnically cleansed enclave. And of course, the UAE is not going to send people there. I mean, the UAE, only 10% of the UAE is actually Emirati nationals. Saudi Arabia's whole premise is to keep its own nationals in Saudi Arabia living there. So again, the problem Israel faces is that even if they are successful in ethnically cleansing Gaza and building these towers, who is going to live in them? It's farcical.
So, in your conclusion, I mean, the article, financial consideration aside, you feel that this is doomed to fail?
Impossible. I say it's doomed to fail. I say impossible. Again, the financial consideration, I should be clear. The reason I said financially feasible is because we have seen so much happen in Gaza that if I had asked you a year or two ago, would you say is it possible? You would have said no. And basically what I tried to do in the article is ask experts in the urban space landscape within the Middle East who have experience in the renovation of Lebanon post-civil war, in Egyptian projects, in Tunisia, in Jordan, is the price tag doesn't make sense. And I think one of the things that stood out to me was that actually the price tag does make sense. This price that the Israeli paper gave, $100 billion, it makes sense. Then what I do in the article is I go on and I say, okay, you can say that this financially it's feasible, but it's impossible because of all these other reasons. So I don't want to overstretch why I'm saying, I'm not trying to give cover for the plan. All I did was say, don't take it too lightly, right? Because again, the authors of this plan are the same ones who came up with the GHF, Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And today, Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is operating in Gaza. So we should not take it so lightly that we just dismiss it, I think is the lesson.
Sean Mathews, thank you again for coming on Arab Talk and sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you, Jamal. Thanks for having me.
That's the voice in the face of Sean Mathews. He's a geopolitical analyst discussing the plans to reconstruct Gaza after the ethnic cleansing and starvation of the Palestinian civilian population there, Jamal. I mean, Gaza Riviera, Gaza reconstruction, there's all these kinds of really bizarre narratives of what various stakeholders, primarily the Americans and the Israelis, want to do in Gaza. It's really a bizarre kind of story in many ways, Jamal. When you look at the kind of juxtaposition of an ongoing ethnic cleansing and genocide, and talking about reconstructing Gaza to be a kind of, paradise for the rich on the Mediterranean, it's truly bizarre.
Well, the funny thing is there is no mention of Palestinians in that reconstruction plan, except that you hear different rumors and different plans, like to give them $5,000 each or 6,000. Some plans say 9,000. Imagine, in this day and age, you give a family of four or five $9,000, let's say, and that's on the high side, to leave their homes, to leave their land, and to go somewhere else. Go to Egypt, go to Sudan, and other places, give up their rights, basically. You know, and some will argue, no, 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 this is temporary and so forth, but it's not. Other ideas is to keep them on one side of Gaza, basically ethnically cleanse them from 80% of Gaza, bottle them up all in one corner of Gaza, basically a large concentration camp on top of the Gaza concentration camp while they're rebuilding. Expect other countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE and others to foot the bill to rebuild a Dubai, I would say Dubai style city for the rich, with no mention of the Palestinians. Are they going to move back to their homes? No, they're not in that plan. So what they're going to do to them? What, enslave them to do labor there, to be
Yeah.
the servants, the waiters, the housekeepers of the rich people? Also, who's going to live there? I mean, who is in the right mind, aside from Netanyahu's ilk, would want to live in an ethnically cleansed land on top of the basically the burial sites of the thousands of Gazans? By the way, there is no mention of what they're going to do with those who died.
Yeah,
How they're
Jamal.
going to give them a dignified, after they dig out all this rubble, how they're going to give them dignified burials and so forth. It's a crazy idea. It's totally based on like an insane idea of people who are looking at their net profit, how they're going to profiteer out of the blood of Palestinians, basically, out of their bones, for those who are buried there, to build hotels, maybe casinos, nightclubs, and so forth, when Palestinians have been starved to death, they've been sniped, they've been bombed, and try to invite, I guess, Europeans to go and vacation there. I mean, that's the whole concept, and play golf.
Right. But I think probably, Jamal, that the more likely scenario, because you asked a very good question, who would, in their kind of reasonable, right, ethical, moral mind, want to go vacation on the blood and the bones of an ethnically cleansed people? Tragically, there's a lot of historical precedents for that, even here in the United States, where we have so much built on, the blood and the tears and the bones of indigenous communities. But to answer your question directly, who would do that? The colonial Israeli settlers who are speaking now about wanting to, resettle and recolonize, stolen land in Gaza. So there's no shortage of Israelis who are actively speaking about wanting to go to Gaza and do this. So if the Europeans don't come, this might be the playground, so to speak, the Israeli settler community that is, chomping at the bit to get into Gaza and to recolonize this area of indigenous communities. I mean, I don't know how this is going to play out because, this is part of some of our other stories, Jamal, because, Israel continues to be globally isolated in some significant ways. Is there any possibility that people would actually want to go to Gaza, given the fact that there are so many tens of thousands of ethnically cleansed souls, buried under the rubble there and starving children? Who knows? But I know that the global outcry is going to continue. The other thing that you didn't mention, I think, is important in terms of the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in Gaza, is that the Egyptian military has been poised on the border in Gaza, and there's no idea whatsoever that the Egyptians are going to allow this. Who knows? Maybe, Sisi changes his mind, but as of now, it doesn't happen. And of course, we have Saudi Arabia and the UAE announcing that if plans to, create this settlement block in the West Bank go forward, normalization is off the table. So there's a lot of political dynamics right now, but what we do know is that the genocide, the ethnic cleansing, the starvation of Palestinian children continues full steam ahead, Jamal. There's no kind of inclination whatsoever, despite what we see in the media, that there's any attempt to stop this march of genocide.
That's right. And then we've been reporting, we actually don't have to report on this because people have been seeing it with their own eyes.
Right.
When it comes to Israel's image globally, which has been totally destroyed despite 70 years of Hasbara and millions of dollars spent on it. We see whether it's in Europe, whether it's in France, whether it's in Germany, whether it's in the UK, whether in the United States, there are people who are speaking out against it. There are people who are demonstrating. There are people who are getting arrested on a daily basis to say enough is enough with this genocide. So, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu, rather than free the hostages, rather than stop the carnage, rather than stop the genocide, which the entire world is asking him to do, now has this nefarious plan is how to brighten Israel's image,
rehabilitate
it after all these years, because they've invested, as you know, whether in Hollywood movies, whether in the news, ads on college campuses, that Israel is such a great democracy in the Middle East, the brightening, the shining star of the region, and so forth. And we know darn well that the entire world is against Israel, and they know it. They know it too. So that's why now the Israel Ministry of Foreign Affairs commissioned an American polling firm to perform a sweeping battery of surveys and focus groups, coupled with message testing. I mean, how do you? I had to say this expression, but you can't shine turd. Yes, I mean, I think a famous American president said that.
Yeah, that's true.
And so they're trying basically, like, how do you get rid of this image of the Israeli soldier who is basically enjoying and posting on TikTok that he's destroying a building, or laughing at the killing of children, or posting the view from his sniper gun shooting a kid in the head, and killing journalists, and killing medics, and killing doctors. And so now they don't want to stop this, but they want to convince you that this is not happening. And they want to convince you that tens of thousands of Palestinians haven't died because of the Israeli aggression. So now they go back to the drawing board, and they hire this big dollar company, basically, in the United States to work with them on, by the way, not just the United States, in the United States and in Europe. And there was a leak to drop site news by a source with direct access to the document, and that's how we know about it. And the work is being performed by Stagwell Global, a firm, by the way, founded by notorious political operative Mark Penn, who serves as the company's chairman and CEO. He donated $100,000 to AIPAC, just to give you who is the founder is, or who was the CEO after October 7th. And his ties to the Likud party, the Israeli Likud party, date back to his work on Menachem Begin's 1981 campaign for prime minister.
Yep. I mean, Jamal, I think this is going to be the big story, which we will not hear in the United States in the mainstream media. Because the one point that you made, which is critical for our viewers and listeners to understand, on the one side, the Israeli government and military have no intention whatsoever of stopping the genocide, stopping the starvation of Palestinian children, or stopping the ethnic cleansing throughout historic Palestine. They're going full steam ahead. Their only option, given that political reality, together with the support of the United States, is to create this Hasbara false narrative that, that started, 77 years ago, right? How, it's even painful to say it now, but this is what they said 77 years ago, right? Israel made the desert bloom. This is a land for a people without a land. I mean, this kind of crazy narrative, which in reality, Jamal, has never worked. But now, because of the global condemnation, we see it every day, Jamal. The global condemnation, whether it's a bicycle race in Spain or Italy, or a soccer match in France, or it doesn't matter, or Israelis trying to vacation in the midst of a genocide in Europe. There is global condemnation, and people on the streets, Jamal, the global mass community, believe what they see. They don't believe Benjamin Netanyahu when he says there's no starvation. They believe the reality. They believe what they see. They believe what is happening on the ground in Gaza and the West Bank. So, I mean, they can hire Mark Penn. They can hire whomever they want. This Hasbara campaign that they're attempting to rehabilitate the Israeli image is not going to work, Jamal. I mean, is it going to work? I mean, I don't believe it's going to work. I mean, there's global condemnation and just such profound ill will against Israel right now. How do you see this really working?
Well, I see it that Benjamin Netanyahu, who on camera in interviews basically said that he knows how to handle the American public.
Well, the American president and the public,
and the public. He said that like, oh, don't worry about in America. I know how to deal with them. He still believes that the Americans, maybe the Brits, the Europeans are still gullible and are going to believe his BS that despite all of the killings, despite what we see with our own eyes, what we hear with our own ears, the cries for help from the victims, that Israel is the victim. And regardless, this is what I really believe that this is what he thinks. He thinks throw $100 million, which is nothing, get AIPAC to do its work. I mean, they still have control over Congress, and we'll spend some money. Americans are gullible. The French are gullible. We'll change public opinion, and we'll just tell them what they're seeing is wrong, and we are still the victims. So they have, they're now testing the ground, and this is very dangerous because you got to hear this, Jess. Which the survey and focus group basically work attempts to discern what the public knows about the ongoing assault on Gaza and what its various attitudes toward Israel currently are. By the way, the survey asked people in the United States, Germany, the United Kingdom, Spain, and France, and how many people they believed Israel had killed in Gaza. So they're focusing on numbers now because they know the truth is going to come out. We're talking about 70,000 now, but it might be 200,000, might be a quarter of a million. And what portion of those were civilians? They're playing this game like, by the way, respondents in all the countries overwhelmingly said that those killed were mostly civilians. Now, so Israel now basically wants to change their mind to say, no, 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 we've been killing terrorists. We've been killing Hamas. We've been getting rid of radical Islam. This is the new trick. So they found out, and this is very dangerous because I'm worried about false flag attacks in European countries saying that Muslims did that or Palestinians did this.
Right.
They found out that Israel's best tactic to combat this, about the genocide, about the number of civilians, and this is according to the study, is to foment fear of radical Islam and jihadism, which remain high in the minds of people. This is according
Right.
to so by highlighting Israeli support, for example, they try to deflect. They say, the biggest danger in the whole world is not Israel, it's radical Islam because A, B, C, whatever. They'll find some
Right.
stories there. And also they highlight Israel's support for women's rights and gay rights while elevating concerns that Hamas wants to destroy all Jews and spread jihadism. This is the message. And when they threw these things to some of the respondents, like testing it, Israeli support rebounded by an average of over 20 points in different countries, especially once the situation in Gaza is resolved. The room for growth in all countries is very significant. This is what the report concluded. So basically, this, I don't want to call it ad. I don't think it's an ad agency. It's just a Hasbara agency. I feel the Stagwell. So they tested the fear of radical Islam and found overwhelming majorities in Europe and the United States cited it as a threat. So they're trying different things, and they fear, don't focus on the genocide, don't focus on the numbers, but let's focus on radical Islam as a threat to the Western world. And therefore people will accept, because they know they will accept the killing fields that Israel has created, because in their minds they're killing terrorists. So those children who are 3 years of age and 2 years of age and the babies, they are terrorists. Just that's what they want to convince you to believe.
But unfortunately, it has worked, Jamal. It has worked since 9/11. That narrative that we have to go after radical Islamists, that we have to go after the jihadists who are attempting to undermine the Western world and what we believe in. That narrative has been active for 25 years. And it helped shape the Americans' opinion about what happened in Afghanistan and Iraq and what's happened in Palestine. That narrative, both the Americans and the Israelis have continued to use that narrative. We see it as part of the Trump administration narrative when they went after Iran, when they went into Lebanon, when they supported the Israeli government and military in the ethnic cleansing in Gaza and the West Bank. So I think we have to face the painful reality that Hasbara narrative actually works, because people have believed this notion that the world is on the brink of collapse because of radical Islam, right? So we have to face that reality, Jamal. People still react very strongly to that idea, despite the fact that there's no basis for it whatsoever, especially given what's been happening in the world lately. But I think your concern about false flag and things like that need to be taken very, very seriously, because this, irrespective of what happens in Gaza, the Israeli government and its military, their campaign to discredit the reality of Palestine and Palestinians and kind of pave over narratively and literally what the crime against humanity that is occurring in Gaza and the West Bank and Jerusalem right now is going full steam ahead. It's full steam ahead, Jamal. And this article or this report, this leaked report that Mark Penn and Stagwell are doing, is, I believe, just the tip of the iceberg and what we're going to be confronting.
Well, that's why we've been saying it over and over again. Why don't they allow the journalists in?
This is why.
Because they don't want them to see what's going on. And they know, and why they keep prolonging this war. I mean, there might be less than 50 hostages now left. And Hamas said time and time again, we will release the hostages. Let's stop. It's not about stopping just the war and, of course, the survival of Benjamin Netanyahu, who, by the way, has been called again to court, is still facing corruption charges and other charges, and to keep him on his seat, basically. But also because they know once you open up Gaza to investigators, forensic experts, and so forth, you're gonna discuss. The world's gonna discover war crimes, unbelievable level of war crimes. I still believe the number is not 60, 70,000. We're
Oh,
going to
it's much
see
higher.
much
Much
higher.
higher.
And the potential and what has been done, and when they start interviewing people, when they start removing the rubble, that's why when they talk about the Gaza Riviera, I'd like to see what they're going to find under the rubble. You know, there are families who are still looking for loved ones. They just can't register as dead or alive because they don't know what happened to them. And that's going to be the shocking discovery, and that's what they don't want you to see. They want to basically bury the evidence. That's what they're doing. They're tearing up buildings. They're not allowing reporters, and they just want to bury the evidence and then bring bulldozers to build new homes, crushing. Sadly, I had to say in this the way to describe it, but basically crushing the bones of the dead, making them
Exactly.
basically disappear, so and unaccounted for, so there is no evidence, and that's the reality. Moving on to our next story, Jess, which is was very emotional to watch, is the Gaza war film, The Voice of Hind Rajab, wins the second prize at the Venice Film Festival, which many of our listeners and viewers, if they're aware of the story of Hind Rajab, the 5-year-old Palestinian girl, which basically was left to die and killed while they killed her family and the medics who went to help her. And you could hear her voice. She's recorded basically breathing her last breaths of air, basically. And so there is a documentary about it, the voice of Hind Rajab, by French-Tunisian director Kauthar Ben Hania, and came in second on this past Saturday at the Venice Film Festival. And it tells the story of Hind Rajab. She was killed by the Israeli forces last year as she and her family tried to evacuate Gaza City. It uses, as I've mentioned, real audio from Rajab's hours-long call to the Palestine Red Crescent Society, in which rescuers try to reassure her as she lay trapped in a bullet-ridden car with the bodies of her aunt, uncle, and 3 cousins who had all been killed by Israeli fire. Then the girl was killed as 2 ambulance workers who went to the scene and tried to rescue her. So the film was the most talked about movie on the Venice Lido, and tipped by many as the likely winner. A lot of people thought it's going to be the likely winner. Well, it's still a great prize. When it premiered, it received a 23-minute emotional standing ovation on its premiere. I just recently watched the filmmaker talks about it and why they did it, and also the winner of the first award also talked about the film and talked about the plight of the Palestinians. Many of also the actors who were awarded different prizes, they all kind of talked about what's happening in Palestine. Israel kind of made itself invisible from the Venice Film Festival. Gal Gadot, who was supposed to appear there, didn't show up because they knew what was going there, and this is why
Right.
why Israel's going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on a Hasbara campaign, hiring ad agencies to repair its image.
The image is irreparably harmed, Jamal, and the Hind Rajab film, The Voice of Hind Rajab, even if you just watch the trailer, will bring you to tears and utter pain. I mean, Hind Rajab's story is if you will, kind of an encapsulation of every single Palestinian child that has been killed, starved to death, that has died as a result of the Israeli military's ethnic cleansing in Gaza. But Hind's story is especially painful. And, the filmmaker in describing their experience of hearing that video is just and hearing the sound and everything is just so painful. And when you listen to the voice of Hind Rajab, it can't not move you to utter tears and despair to understand what this 5-year-old child had to go through, the fear that she had about being left alone. And yet, Jamal, this story of Hind Rajab is the story of thousands and thousands of Palestinian children. And, I think you said it. Gal Gadot doesn't show up. Israel is not really present at the Venice Film Festival. They don't want to be seen. They're persona non grata globally right now. And this is kind of the struggle right now is and this is our main story today is how will the Israelis rehabilitate themselves from being globally hated by the entire world right now? How are they going to do this? Nobody wants to partner with the Israelis right now except Donald Trump and his administration. That's it. I mean that's a big support obviously, but the rest of the world sees through this. And when they see this film, Jamal, you're going to be moved beyond belief. And we want to encourage our viewers and listeners to see this film. It's if you can handle it, because it's so painful. It's so utterly painful to try to wrap your mind around what this young Palestinian girl had to go through. Really, it's devastating.
And our last story, a few minutes left, Jess, is, and we talked about this many, many
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
The dwindling number of Palestinian Christians,
Yeah.
it just keeps getting worse. And Israel is doing its part, and it has doubled down and accelerated their attacks on Palestinian Christians, be it in Gaza, where they bombed churches in Gaza, and also in the West Bank, the attack on the Palestinian Christian village of Al Taibe recently, burning a church there. And despite international calls from various global Christian communities, and even the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, went there and denounced the attack of settlers on the Christian village of Taibe, the Israeli settlers continue to attack Christians unabated, just every single day. They break into Taibe and other villages, Bethlehem, Beit Jala, other place, throwing stones at homes, trying to set the homes on fire, attacking people, scribbling Hebrew messages, threats, leave, you must leave this village, this is our land, torching vehicles, and so on. And now Israel is calling on Gaza, because they're calling on everybody, but also targeting also the Christian community, the very, very little Christian community that's remaining in Gaza. You must leave. Again, last part, you must leave, because we're going to bomb. We're going to bomb your areas. We're looking for Hamas. That's the excuse there. And the Christian community is saying, no, we
Right.
are not. If I saw interviews. They are going, when Israel's going to start now, most of them live in a couple of neighborhoods around their churches and so forth. And basically now they made a statement. There's the several families there. They live in the church's quarters in the Zaytun neighborhood. They have survived close calls with death when the Israeli tanks shelled the church in July, killing 3 people. They wounded several others. And now Israel is telling them that we are going to start a major assault on Gaza City, and told them to leave the dangerous combat zone. Tell me what is not a dangerous combat zone in Gaza. They keep saying, this is a dangerous combat zone. Go to the safe zone. And then so you could get mowed down.
Like there's a safe zone in Gaza, right?
And so basically, Uh, this is around also there is this couple of churches now left standing. The third church is mostly destroyed. The Holy Family Church basically is marked now as a zone for expulsion. The other churches in Gaza City, including the Greek Orthodox Church of Saint Porphyrius and the Anglican Saint Philip's Church, also now they are marked in a zone of destruction. And basically the very small Christian community around there, 550 people basically left around the churches, and most of them sheltering in the Holy Family Church. And they just made a statement and said, you know what? You're going to kill us. You're going to destroy the roof of the church on top of our head. We are going to die where we are going to be, which is at these churches when you start. And I'm like thinking, well, where is the Christian world? Where are the Catholic 2 billion Christians around
Where's
the
Pope
globe?
Leo? Where's Pope Leo?
Yeah, and these guys, what are we going to do? We're going to study about them in history as the Christian martyrs who died in these churches because Israel bombed the churches. So this is a real warning, and we don't have enough time to talk about how they are treated and spat on in Jerusalem. The priests are attacked, the nuns are attacked, but now we are on the brink, and of course, the Christians in Gaza, they don't want special treatments. They say we are Palestinians. We and other Palestinians died the same thing, but we are not going to leave. We don't want special treatment, and if people are staying in Gaza, be it Muslims or other, we are staying with them.
Right.
We don't want to be evacuated. We don't want to be
Right.
sent to Egypt to live in the Sinai or have a Western country that's going to bring us there as refugees. We want to die in our own country if you cannot stop this genocidal regime.
Well, Jamal, this is a very big story which is not being picked up anywhere in the mainstream media, just either in the United States or globally, but the attacks and the attempt to kind of destroy the Christian presence in Gaza and throughout, historic Palestine is very deep. I'm reminded of a story that was covered a little bit on the Vatican News this past week because the Israeli president came to visit Pope Leo. And if you can believe the Vatican News this last week, and if you can believe the Vatican News, apparently Pope Leo dressed down and criticized the Israeli president and asked him to basically go for an immediate ceasefire. So, but these are just words, Jamal. I think what you said is very poignant. I mean, we know that Christians globally right now, except for the extremists, the right-wing kind of Christian Zionist community, but Christians in general stand very, very strongly in support of Palestine, in support of Palestinian Christians, in support of all Palestinians. Actually, we know that globally, but we see this. They're being eradicated. Israel is eradicating Christians, not just from Gaza, but from, as you said, Jerusalem, from Bethlehem in the West Bank, from these small Christian communities in and around Bethlehem. It's devastating. And so I put the question back to our listeners and viewers. If this was happening any other place in the world, wouldn't the Christian community stand up and be outraged by the attack on the Christian communities that is going on in Palestine right now? So we do see the double standard. We see the anti-Palestinian racism occurring, where they're allowed to commit these acts, these atrocities against Palestinian Christians, and nothing of substance is being done about it. It's a real tragedy.
You've been listening to Arab Talk on KPO San Francisco 89.5 FM. Go to our website, arabtalkradio.com, to download the latest shows, and we'll talk to you next week.
We'll see you next week.